Hi everyone, hope you're enjoying LayerOne. Welcome to the Raise Me Village. My name is Jason Romero. I go by Glitch, and on Twitter I am at underscore GlitchXR. The talk I'm going to be giving today is called Bypassing the HR Firewall. The reason why I decided to give this talk is when I was first trying to enter into the InfoSec workspace, I found that it was very challenging despite holding a number of certifications, despite almost completing my bachelor's in cybersecurity. And I found that there were just certain things that are certain roadblocks that were preventing me in obtaining callbacks or interviews. So I went back to the drawing board and figured out what I can do to kind of make myself a little bit more desirable, um, so to speak, being able to apply experience on my resume, um, so that way it would translate into um kind of hitting the ground running. It would make it more desirable and prompt more callbacks for interviews and hoping to secure that InfoSec position that I've been longing for. So while a lot of these tips um, may not necessarily be new, they're just tips that I found that worked well for me, and hoping that you might be able to take away um, kind of like your own template that you can apply that will prompt you in getting callbacks a lot more, and hopefully landing you a position that you desire within that InfoSec space. So just a little bit about my roadmap when I first started. Um, I wasn't uh, I wasn't trying to get into InfoSec when I first started, or when I first entered the workforce. I started in a customer service position, kind of bounced around in multifacets of customer service, whether it be face-to-face, call centers, small businesses, large corporations. And I ended up going back to school, started at the community college level, and once I was able to obtain my associates in information technology, I decided to go ahead and put myself out there and try and land a general IT or help desk role, which I was able to do. From there, I pivoted into an incident response analyst. So after about 3 years of help desk work, and completing my bachelor's in cybersecurity, I was able to pivot into that incident response analyst role for a fintech company. From there, I spent about almost 2 years. Definitely provided a good foundation, not only with it being my first InfoSec role, but um, incident response as a whole. It kind of allowed me to not only see alerts that were coming in, but I was able to respond to incidents. I learned a lot about communication with other departments, and all of that experience allowed me to um, show that I was ready for that next level. And now I am currently a security engineer. I just started this new role um, on March of this year. So definitely learning a lot from this new role, and I'm looking to definitely expand my knowledge base as well as my experience. But this is just like a little roadmap that may be similar to yours. Some of you may not have started in a tech role. Some of you may be transitioning from um, other spaces of work. So this is just to kind of show you that I wasn't always within a tech background, that I started out in customer service, both retail, and then just kind of worked my way up um, into the current role that I'm at. So what are we going to talk about today? So a couple different topics. So we're going to talk about the vacancies and skills gaps that are currently existing within the workforce. I know a lot of you are seeing on the news lately about how there's so many different, cybersecurity job openings. And, that's going to prompt you to be, in that mindset of, great, there's all these openings. I should be able to just, get a job, really easily, just because there's so many openings that are there. But a lot of you are finding out that it's a lot more challenging to fill those roles. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to pivot into the job hunting loop, which was really frustrating for me when I was first trying to get into InfoSec. And I'm sure a lot of you, once we get to that slide, you'll be able to understand what I mean by that job hunting loop. Next, we're going to talk about roadblocks. So these are certain things that may prevent you from getting that call back, or maybe, not be as articulated as well as it possibly could on your resume. That'll show that, you can fulfill the duties of the specific job you're applying for. So these are just different roadblocks that I have structured on that particular slide. Also going to talk about ways that we can go ahead and, showcase your best strengths to overcome those roadblocks. Next, we're going to talk about resumes. Resumes are a big part, whenever you're applying for jobs, because the recruiters, the hiring managers, HR, they're going to see your resumes before they even see you. So you want to make sure that your resumes are able to speak volumes for you when you're not able to. And you want to be able to list what you can on there to make yourself as desirable as possible so it can prompt that callback to schedule an interview for that role that you're applying for. Next, we're going to talk about networking. Networking within the business world is huge, and it's no different within the cybersecurity space. So, um, networking is very crucial, and I'll actually be able to share some of my experiences with networking and how I leverage networking to allow me to expand the possibilities that I had for um, job openings and opportunities out there. And next, we're going to talk about, experience before experience. So a lot of you are asking, how can I get experience if I don't have experience? So uh, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to kind of strengthen your experience, even if you may not have that professional experience that you can put on your resume. But there's a lot of different things that you can leverage to show that you're, constantly learning and you're getting hands-on with the things that are needed for a security role, so that way you can be better prepared for when you are applying for your next role. So just a few facts here that I was able to obtain from ISACA. So it says here that cybersecurity jobs are in huge demand, but as many organizations are all too aware, it continues to be a real struggle to find the right candidates with the right skills and experience to meet the demands of these roles. So what I found interesting were the key findings that you see listed here. Um, so 62% say that their organization's cybersecurity team is understaffed. So that's more than half of their organization's cybersecurity teams are currently understaffed. So seeing that figure, prompts the question, if there's such a large need, why is it so hard to get into, uh, why is it so hard for you to get yourself into those roles? 57% say that they currently have unfulfilled cybersecurity positions on their team. So again, echoing the high demand for cybersecurity jobs, um, which should make you as a job seeker happy and encouraging, because there are, open positions out there that need to be filled. Another statistic is that 70% say that fewer than half of their cybersecurity applicants are well qualified. So that's touches a little bit on the skills gap that is going to be needed to fill those roles. 72% of cybersecurity professionals believe that their HR departments do not regularly understand their needs, which also causes a drop in communication between what a hiring manager is looking for compared to what HR might put on that job description that they're going to put out there on those job boards. And then 58% of respondents anticipate an increase in cybersecurity budgets and an increase of 3 percentage points from last year, but less than 64% that was reported 2 years ago, signaling that spending may be leveling out. Now, just recently, this month, uh, CBS News actually put out this article stating that the US has almost 500,000 job openings in cybersecurity. There's about 465,000 open positions in cybersecurity nationwide as of May 2021, according to CyberSeek. Um, Again, the last slide showed the ISACA statistics, which was actually from a couple years ago. With this statistic being just this month, there's obviously a still a need for cybersecurity positions to be filled, and that doesn't look like it's going to be going away anytime soon, especially with the increase in ransomware activity as well as other threats that are ongoing. So now, in reference to the job hunting loop that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is I can't get a job because I don't have experience following into that loop because I can't get a job. So a big question is how do I get experience if I don't have experience? So this kind of correlates with that. And my hot take on this is that getting a job in security is challenging, but getting an interview is even more challenging. So when I was first starting out, I went ahead and put my resume out there to different jobs that I felt I may be qualified for. Now, I may not have that direct security experience from a help desk job or general IT work, but I felt that I was able to check off a lot of the boxes that I saw on the job boards, and that whatever I was not as strong in, I was able to um, at least learn in a quick manner so that way I can um, fulfill the needs of that particular role. However, what would happen is, I'd find a job, apply for it, attach my resume, wait a couple days, sometimes weeks, hoping for a response. If I was lucky, I would get a response saying thanks, but no thanks. If on the other side of that coin, sometimes I may, never even hear from someone in regards to my application. And so I would continue this day in and day out, and almost to the point of it being part of my routine. And I could never figure out why was I not able to get any callbacks after being able to, send out my resume, show that I had technical experience for my IT and help desk jobs. What was missing that was not allowing me to get a call back for an interview, a phone screen. Um, and that's when I had to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out what can I do to make myself more desirable, and what can I do to um, start getting noticed so that way I can get more calls and more phone screens and more interviews. What I had figured out was that there were a lot of roadblocks that were preventing me from entering into um, the InfoSec workspace. And I'm tossing between back and forth on these particular terms, but I'll use cybersecurity and InfoSec interchangeably, but just know that they are one and the same. So as far as the roadblocks go, I found that these were the four core roadblocks that really prevent the application process from moving forward into an interview. One being certificates. When you're entering into a security workspace, there's typically a certificate that's associated with the position. If you're entering into like the public sector, so like government work, there's typically always going to be a security plus that's going to be tagged with that job application. Some roles will require a more higher end certificate, such as like a SAN cert, maybe even a CISSP. But there's always going to be certificates. I shouldn't say always, but there are more commonly certificates listed on those job descriptions that employers are wanting from those candidates. Another roadblock is a degree. This really depends on the organization. More formal or larger organizations are going to require a degree. Other smaller companies, sometimes vendors, um, some organizations, they may not require one. But if there is a requirement on the degree, sometimes that will be an automatic reject if you're applying for that position and you don't meet that requirement. If you're lucky, you might find a company that will say that it's preferred but not required. And I strongly encourage you to kind of pay attention to those keywords of preferred but not required, just because if you're in the middle of your um, if you're in the middle of school, you're anticipating graduating within, I would say, a year or so, still apply for that position because preferred is something that the company is going to want, but it's not going to be a hard requirement that would prevent you from getting the job or at least securing an interview just because you're still in the middle of that degree. Big roadblock is experience. A lot of security companies are going to want to hire candidates that have experience. Some may require, a couple of years, some may require 5+ years. But there are companies that will definitely encourage you to apply if you do, even if you do not have the experience needed. Again, this kind of falls back within the preferred requirements over, or I'm sorry, the preferred, uh, I guess, values are variables compared to the required variables that whenever they're looking for a particular candidate. And then I'll later on in the presentation, I'll actually talk more about how you can gain experience that you can apply to your resume whenever you are submitting for those roles to make yourself more desirable. So experience should not be just in the form of professional experience from an employer. Experience can be a lot of different things, and I'll touch on more on that in a little bit. And another roadblock that I found, which may be actually kind of outside the realm of the normal roadblocks, are tools. And I put this on here not specifically as a roadblock, but something that you can put on your resume that will actually make you stand out more than someone that may not have it on their resume. So what I did when I was first looking for roles is I would, see what boxes I could check off and then just apply for that role if I felt that I checked off enough that would make me warrant a call back from the employer. But what I found is that there were certain tools that were listed in those job descriptions that they're looking for. So for like a SOC analyst, for example, you may see on the job description that they are looking for someone that has SIEM experience or intrusion detection system experience, maybe firewall experience. Um, so some of the job descriptions may actually list out the tools that you would want to be comfortable with in order to be able to perform the duties required of that position. So what I would do is I started noticing the specific tools that they were looking for, and I decided to further my knowledge on those particular tools. I did, a deep dive on, SIEMs, intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems, web application firewalls, things like that that I can either go to YouTube just to kind of gain some theory on. There are some, free open source tools that you can download and apply in a virtual lab so you can kind of gain that hands-on experience with the tools. But being able to apply that theory and hands-on experience with those particular tools will actually make you stand out a lot more than someone that may not actually have that on their resume. And that has actually improved, for me at least, the number of callbacks that I would get when I started to put those tools on my resume because they were starting to now apply directly to the job and the tools that were required of that particular job. So I definitely encourage you, if you are looking at the job descriptions, pay attention to the tools that they list in there. And if they are within your reach as far as, ability to kind of gain that theory or hands-on experience, I highly encourage you to do so. And whatever you are learning from that, put that on your resume because that will definitely make you stand out. Speaking of resumes, there are a lot of do's and don'ts, and I've kind of just narrowed it down to the top two of each category. Um, and again, this is purely subjective, so this is, you're going to get a lot of different feedback depending on who is reviewing the resume. And before I, before I actually got into my security role, all I would do is just mass blast my resume. I would think that, it was fine the way it is and not really cater my resume to the role that I was applying for. And I found out that that was actually another reason why I was not getting callbacks is because hiring managers or recruiters can tell if it's more of a template resume as opposed to a resume that's catered toward the position that you're applying for. So one thing I highly encourage you to do is to actually create a new resume for each job. Now, I don't mean to, create a new resume in the sense that you're having to write a new one for every job that you're applying for. What I mean by that is once you read the job description, and if you're not reading the job description, highly encourage you to start reading the entire job description and pull things from that job description that you can put into your resume. If they are, if the job description is calling for someone that has experience in Splunk, you definitely want to, and you have, Splunk experience or you've watched videos on Splunk or have some familiarity with it, I highly encourage you to put the Splunk experience into your resume. Even if it's just I've completed Splunk Fundamentals 1, that's going to show the hiring manager or the recruiter that you read the job description and that you're able to apply your particular skill set or tools to that job description itself. So again, you're not creating a whole new one from scratch. What you're doing more or less is kind of plugging and playing different things that you read in that job description into your resume. Now, that doesn't mean to lie. So if you have no Splunk experience, that doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to put the word Splunk, in the job description and hope that they don't call me out on it. Because believe me, they will call you out on whatever you put in your resume. It also doesn't mean to put the word Splunk in white font at the bottom of the resume, and so that way they don't see it and it just gets picked up, by whatever scanners that those companies are using to match keywords, because that's not going to get you anywhere as well. But definitely, again, read the job description and use what they put in that job description, if applicable, into your resume. Another thing you want to do is highlight the strengths first. So if you have no experience in security, no experience in tech, and a lot of your experience comes from school or certifications, you want to highlight those first because that's going to speak more on the position that you're applying for than your customer service experience, that you might have from the retail jobs, um, that you might have had before. So you want whoever's reading to be captured by the strengths first as opposed to, job experience or anything else. So definitely highlight those strengths first. When I was first applying, I would just put my job experience first and certifications and, skills, tools more toward the bottom, or even on the second page. And once I kind of flipped that and applied my tools and skill set first, and certifications next, that actually prompted more callbacks, more phone screens, just because that particular section were the strengths that I was able to apply to the roles that I was applying for. So a couple of don'ts. Don't mass blast your resume. I know I already touched on this a little bit, but don't use the same resume for every job that you're applying for. It kind of goes hand in hand with the first bullet point under the do section. Um, Doing that is only going to do a disservice to yourself and waste your time because you're not going to get as many callbacks that way as you would if you articulated, or I'm sorry, created a new resume for each job. Another don't is don't keep it to yourself. Um, you definitely want to have others review your resume. And again, everyone is going to have their own particular feedback or method on how resumes should be constructed. And again, that's why I say it's subjective because everyone is going to have their own method, whenever they are creating their own resume or providing resume feedback. So it's definitely good to have multiple people review the resume and kind of get different feedback so that way you can take all of that feedback and kind of combine it into what could be a almost near perfect resume because now you're getting feedback from multiple sources and you're collecting all of that into forming the best possible resume that you can from the feedback that you've gathered so far. So again, don't keep it to yourself. Definitely have others review it, and you'll notice a hopefully bigger spike in callbacks after you adjust your resume accordingly. The next thing is networking. And like I said in the beginning, networking is big in business and it's just as big in InfoSec cybersecurity space. And I know this firsthand because when I was first applying for security jobs, I wasn't getting any callbacks. And again, it's recycled statement, but I wasn't really, I guess, as desirable. And so once I was able to network and branch out into other spaces, other meeting, new people, things like that, I noticed that that actually helped me in the long run because the last two job opportunities that I had were all from me networking. So the first is just to make connections. That can, take place in a number of different ways. But just making connections is the first step because once you do that, you're able to kind of branch out and establish a stronger um, network of people, colleagues, friends, things of that nature. Two, leverage social media. I didn't have a very big presence on social media, um, more specifically Twitter. And once I realized the space that InfoSec had within Twitter, I leveraged that and capitalized it as much as I could. And it definitely paid dividends just because I was able to meet, some amazing people. Um, a lot of those people I consider friends, and people help one another out, especially when you're kind of putting a broadcast out there that you are trying to get into this space. You're doing what you can, and basically it's almost a call for help. Can anyone review my resume? Give me some feedback. That's a great way of, leveraging social media. Can anyone offer me any like interview tips or mock interviews? Just different things. And for the most part, the InfoSec space, on social media is very helpful, very encouraging, especially for those just entering in to this industry. So definitely encourage you to leverage social media as much as you can. And if you are more of an introvert, this may be a good way to kind of help alleviate, um, some of the, networking awkwardness that you might experience, by leveraging on social media first, as opposed to what would be the next, two topics here is joining local meetups and attending conferences. So within, cybersecurity space, local meetups are a great way to kind of have that intimate engagement, but still walk away from it learning a lot. And local meetups are great for not only sharing knowledge, but kind of building a more niche network because they're local to you. They're all within, the kind of same space. So local meetups are great. Highly encourage you to do so. A lot of them will host their events, or at least share their calendar on things like Meetup, Eventbrite, things like that. And then attending conferences. My first InfoSec conference was didn't come until 2019, and it was coincidentally at LayerOne, and that's what actually um, first introduced me to RaiseMe. Was I was completely lost, and by kind of word of mouth, I was told that volunteering at conferences is a great way to not only build on that networking, but give back to the InfoSec community as well. So I reached out to LayerOne. I introduced myself, said I was a student and looking to, uh, volunteer if there's, a need for that. And, please, let me know if there's any way I can help. And sure enough, I got an email from Datagram and, was basically told, welcome, saying, sure thing, come on down, register, we'll go ahead and get you set up. And, you know, once I got there, it was, great because I was able to just help out, in any way that, I could. Got to meet some great people and again, introduced to, Raise Me Village, which was I thought was just amazing because being so new into InfoSec and not really having a, structured path or direction as far as, kind of how to pivot or, how to progress in my development. Um, Raise Me was, a godsend just because I was able to gain so much knowledge and I felt, not only just welcomed, but I felt, a strong sense of support that, now after talking with the Raise Me consultants, it made things a little bit clearer. Definitely gave me a um, more structured path, and I thank them and pretty much am indebted to them for the progression that I've gained or that I've made since 2019. So definitely, again, kudos to Raise Me. It's what prompted me to stay with Raise Me since first being introduced to them, and now I'm a consultant with them as well, just because of how much they helped me, and I want to be there to help anyone that needs it that was in my shoes 2 years ago. So now, as far as the experience goes, a couple different ways that you can gain that, and um, again, results may vary on this just depending on what you can take away from it, what you can apply. But these are the things that kind of worked for me. Um, and again, it's not meant to be cookie cutter, but these are just kind of ideas to kind of throw at you that you may not have thought maybe experience, or you may, um, not have thought that maybe putting that on my resume would be a good idea. So these are the things that kind of worked for me as far as what I was able to apply as experience on a resume. And again, this is a lot of actually kind of regurgitated from what was told to me back in 2019 when I was speaking with the Raise Me consultants. So volunteering at conferences is actually really huge. Not only is it going to show that you are a team player, it's going to show that um, you like to give back to the InfoSec community. You work well with others. There's a lot of soft skills involved with volunteering at conferences, just because behind the curtains of a conference, a lot goes on, a lot planning. Um, there's also like a high level of stress just to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. So there's definitely a lot of soft skills that can be learned from volunteering at conferences that you can apply to your resume and to the workforce as well. So I highly encourage you to volunteer for conferences. Um, Not only are you able to give back to the InfoSec community, you're also able to gain those soft skills like I'd mentioned, but you also are able to attend conferences for free most of the time, just because you're volunteering your time um, to be able to do so. So in return, you normally would get access to the conference whenever you're not in those volunteering shifts. So it's definitely a great way to kind of gain more exposure to conferences as well, especially if money is a factor. Another thing that most people would not think to put on a resume, but actually does speak to experience, are capture the flag events. So capture the flag events are events that are usually held at conferences that test a number of skills, um, that range from cryptography, packet analysis. Um, there's a wide range of topics that are usually covered within capture the flag events, and participating in those not only allows you to kind of broaden your skills, maybe even develop new skills, but writing those skills down on your resume actually does speak volume as far as experience goes, because you're able, especially if you're able to actually take notes on what you did and showcase that in your resume. It's going to show that, one, you're not afraid to kind of just go in and um, basically go into a situation blind. And what I mean by that is whenever you're engaging in a capture the flag event, you have no idea what the scenarios are and you're beforehand. So you're going into it, presented the scenario once the event starts, and you gain points based on however many flags you uncover. So it doesn't matter if you've uncovered just one flag or half the flags or all the flags, but being able to document that experience onto your resume will actually help, because it will show, that you're not afraid to kind of put yourself out there and go after something, especially if you're not too familiar with it. Another big one that I highly encourage, and you know, you should be doing almost every day, if not every day, is getting hands-on experience with virtual labs. And you can do that either with VMware, VirtualBox, those are the two primary ones. But being able to download virtual images and play with them will definitely enhance that on-hands experience that you may need for a particular role. So there's a lot of websites that actually do host vulnerable images that you can download, plug into your hypervisor, and basically um, try and break it, if that's like the main goal. There's also some blue team virtual images as well. And whatever you do within that virtual lab environment, you want to be able to speak to on your resume, just because it's going to show that you're doing something that's earning you that experience, but you're not getting paid for it. And I think that speaks a lot of volume as well, because there's a lot of other things you could be doing in your free time. And, investing in yourself and developing or sharpening your skills in virtual labs is definitely a great investment to do. So, highly encourage you to engage in virtual labs and just play around with it. I mean, the good thing about virtual labs is that if you break something, you can just reload a snapshot, or, um, you know, not worry about causing any direct damage to your main system. So, highly encourage you to participate in, kind of getting the hands-on experience with virtual labs. The next is personal projects. So, if you have any personal projects, it could be blogs, it could be, code that you've written, um, that you have stored in GitHub, anything that you can, speak to, again, will look good on your resume, because it's showing that you're using your free time to work on yourself, work on sharpening any skills or developing those new skills. And it's going to show a lot of character whenever that hiring manager is looking at that particular section in your resume. So don't be afraid to post your GitHub on there, even if you only have a couple of Python scripts that you've written. Um, don't be afraid to, mention your blog, if it's relative to the, job that you're applying for, to the things that you've been learning, because that's going to, show that you've been documenting what you've been learning so far, kind of giving the hiring manager a timeline of what you've been doing leading up to the point of you submitting your resume. And so that kind of leads into how you can kind of obtain, you know, training and resources. And there's obviously a lot of different avenues you can take. Some are paid, some are free. I decided to just go ahead and list the free training resources here, just because it's, um, one who doesn't like free. If it's, available, you definitely want to take it. So obviously, you can go the path of paying for training. There's a lot of different vendors and companies out there that offer paid training, but one resource that I love to use, and a shout out to DFIR Diva, is on her site. She actually will list and update free training and resources, and it covers all kinds of training. So you have your core training, which is your basic cybersecurity training. There's digital forensics and incident response training. There's training that's specific to kids. So if you have little ones and you want to kind of expose them to what you're learning, there's training resources or links to those training resources in there. Training for veterans. If you're a veteran, there's definitely a lot of resources that are available to you within the cybersecurity space, and she also includes that as well. She'll also list one-time or monthly training, as well as ethical hacking training. So her website is free. It's actually dfirdiva.com, but the link I put here is freetraining.dfirdiva.com. And that particular link in the slide will actually take you directly to the free training site portion of the site. But yeah, definitely kudos to her because she is great as far as keeping it updated, um, and is couldn't thank her enough for, putting in her time to deliver the resources there. So definitely encourage you to visit that site just to kind of get an idea as far as what free training resources are out there. So the next thing I want to talk about is imposter syndrome. And this is, I guess, kind of like a gray area topic, but it's definitely a topic that should be talked about because one, I suffered from it when, I was first kind of getting into this space because it can be very intimidating when you're kind of surrounded by people who are able to, articulate things very well, get very technical about things, and all of a sudden this wave of, um, doubt kind of, surrounds you, and you're kind of left wondering if you belong in this space, if your skills don't measure up to the people that you're meeting at conferences or meeting at these local meetups or online. And it's something that I personally still deal with, but it's something that is also great to kind of remind yourself that even though you may feel like this, there's a lot of other people that feel like it as well. And I think being in cybersecurity is a great space to be in because while there may be someone that might have more knowledge on one area, they may lack knowledge in another area that you might have a strength at. And it took me a while to actually understand that this particular space is a space where everyone is always going to be constantly learning. There's no finish line, when it comes to this particular, space. And once I was actually able to understand that, it actually helped me overcome that imposter syndrome, where instead of focusing on the doubt or not measuring up to other people that would be in this field, I've, understanding that we're all in this space learning together has helped me overcome that. And now I'm able to kind of focus on the areas that I'm good at and the areas that I can, definitely learn a lot more about. And I think that as long as you're constantly learning, that should be a reminder that, you shouldn't, succumb to imposter syndrome. Because again, we're all learning together in this space. Um, it should never deter anyone from entering it or continuing to pursue it because, we can all learn something from each other. And that's kind of what this space is all about is, sharing knowledge. That's kind of the main, reason for conferences, aside from, meeting up with everybody is sharing knowledge. Someone has a cool talk that they are submitting because they figured out something that, they discovered by accident. They want to share that with everyone, and that is a, big takeaway, whenever you're kind of understanding that we're all in this space together, learning from one another, and that should really help you kind of overcome that, especially if you're new coming into this space, whether it be from a help desk background or transitioning from a completely different industry. So just a reminder that, you know, don't let imposter syndrome get the best of you because we're all learning together in this space. So this next slide I have here is more of a, you know, great, all the slides that you discussed previously, are great to kind of, take away, but in my eyes, it doesn't really carry that much weight if I don't practice what I preach. So a lot of the things that I discussed are kind of the things that I went through in this process of kind of figuring out how to kind of break my way into, the security workspace. So, I know I touched a little bit on these things, but, I networked through social media. So I didn't have a LinkedIn before, but now I do. Wasn't really involved in Twitter too much. Now I am. Uh, so definitely encourage you to, utilize social media because I did, and it has paid dividends from just putting myself out there and kind of, letting people know that, hey, I'm, when I was first starting, I'm learning, and eager to learn and just kind of want to absorb, whatever knowledge you have and just putting myself out there to, let people know that, this is a space I want to be in. And so that's what I did. I focused on learning themes. So when I was first um, trying to get into a security role, I tried to go after, SOC analyst jobs, security operations center analyst jobs. So a lot of that position is going to rely on SIEMs to help them, aggregate logs and see what kind of alerts are that they would need to um, attend to. And so I focused on learning SIEMs, first by the theory of kind of understanding what a SIEM is, what a SIEM does, and then the hands-on as far as, downloading Splunk, um, downloading images of, uh, boss of the SOC, and just kind of getting that hands-on experience as far as how to navigate through the GUI of Splunk itself, um, knowing kind of just different things that I can use to enhance, um, creating correlation searches within Splunk, just to be able to kind of speak on that whenever it was time for me to get a call for an interview. And they, were to ask me, tell me about your experience with Splunk. You know, being able to understand the theory of it and how it can help a SOC analyst with, their, daily task and articulating the experience that I had within my virtual labs was able to kind of help me go from, general IT or help desk into that incident response analyst role that I landed. Another thing I did was, had others review my resume, and I went directly to social media with that. Um, and it was almost like a cry for help. I would, you know, tweet out that, hey, I've tried submitting, for security roles, submitting my resume for security roles, not getting any callbacks. Would anyone mind reviewing my resume? So I would redact the private information that I didn't want to have others see, sent, it off to people that were willing to review it, and I listened to their feedback. Not only did I listen to the feedback, but I applied the feedback to that resume, um, and that really helped me kind of understand, from an outside perspective, what they were seeing that I may not have been seeing. And so um, that's what I did. I just had others review it, kind of took a collection as the feedback, and was able to articulate a resume that um, has definitely increased, um, a higher turn on callbacks, sending emails, scheduling interviews, and I definitely have, the community to thank for that, for just kind of spending their time and reviewing my resume and um, kind of sharing their knowledge on, and feedback with me. Another thing I did was I would I built a virtual lab and I just practiced every day. Um, there is a great site called cyberdefenders.org where they actually have virtual images of Boss of the SOC from Splunk, and I would load that up in VirtualBox and I would just get that hands-on experience that I needed. Um, there's also another great resource that I failed to mention, which I should actually include that next time, but Sam, believe the last name is pronounced Bone or Bown, Bowne, and his site is great. He is a professor at, I believe it's San Francisco Community College, cybersecurity professor, and he actually opens his course to everybody. So any courses that he teaches at the school, he opens to everybody if they would like to learn, along with the class that he teaches. There's no charge if you're not a student. There's obviously you're not going to get any credit or grade, but what you gain is the, knowledge that he shares from the class, as well as possibly some hands-on experience with any tools that he utilizes in those classes. So he's also another great, resource, but he actually is the individual that introduced me to the Boss of the SOC, virtual imaging, and um, being able to use that actually did help develop my Splunk skills a lot. And so um, utilizing that in the virtual lab really helped, pay off dividends. Um, Another thing that really helped out was the long nights and early mornings, and that's going to be the time that you're having to spend to practice those skills. It took me, late nights. Sometimes I'd wake up early mornings, when everyone else was asleep, and just kind of practiced because, again, practice makes perfect. And the last thing is I volunteered at cons whenever I can. I still do. Volunteering is something that I love to do. It's great to meet people, at the cons and just kind of share your experience and, get to know one another. So it's definitely great to do. Again, that's why I highly encourage you to do it. It's something I thoroughly enjoy, and I'm sure that you will too, if you decide to do it. So that is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you all for joining in. If you have any questions, make sure to go ahead and drop it in the Discord channels. And again, enjoy LayerOne. Thank you again.